Right. Hey guys, how's it going? This is episode 1 of the Cyber Hacks 101 series that I hope to do for quite a while, depending how this all goes. So today we're going to do some basics. One of them is focusing on how to set up a virtual machine. We're going to have Windows and Kali Linux side by side, and then we're going to show you how to get the machines to talk to each other, how to check for security at your own home, and see what kind of things criminals may do to see if they can attack your network at the house, etc. So, with that being said, thank you for tuning in. And if you're watching this on demand later, please still leave a comment. I'll check it out, and then we'll go from there. So, with that being said, we're going to kick things off and go to the first virtual machine and show you how to set that up. Okay, so this is just a Windows 7 box. Let me turn the sound down a little bit more here. So with Windows 7, obviously it's older, not the best for security, but really easy for us to install some tools and show you things. If you want to mess around with Linux in general, I recommend doing it in a virtual machine. It makes things a lot easier. So let me do this. Okay, so we're going to create a virtual machine, and this is VMware Workstation. It allows you to install multiple copies of Windows, multiple copies of Linux, etc. So we're going to start with a Linux one, of course. I already have a Linux one configured, but this is basically the rundown. We're going to hit Create New Virtual Machine, and this software is free, by the way. So let's browse to the desktop because I just downloaded Kali. So what you want to do is choose what kind of virtual machine you want to configure. In this case, I wanted Kali Linux, so I downloaded the Kali Linux ISO, which is basically like an image of a disk you can download on your computer. So we did that. You select the ISO, and then we're going to hit Next. So it couldn't really detect what operating system it was. If it was Ubuntu, it would have, and it would have kind of pre-selected these. But in this case, because it's Kali Linux, and more than one of these will work. I'm just picking the one that I know works best. In this case, it's Debian 8 or Debian 8 64-bit. We're going to hit Next, and you can label it whatever you want. Let's say Kali or Stream. Going to hit Next. Set the disk size. It's nothing crazy. This is a temporary thing. So with Kali, you want at least 20 gigs. I recommend 25 to 30 gigs if you actually want to install a couple things on it and play with it more. So let's go to Next again. And here's where you can customize your hardware. So for those tuning in now, we're going to start with the basics of just how to install a virtual machine. I'm not going to actually run the full installation process. We'll get you to the point where you need to be, but this is how you configure it. So I'm going to hit Customize Hardware because there's a couple things you want to change. 512 megs of RAM is not a lot for any operating system with an interface. So if you want folders, mouse and key, icons, pictures, etc., you need a lot more than that. Because this is in megabytes, you want at least 2 gigs of RAM if you have a lot of space on your machine. Let's say you have a laptop or a desktop with 8 to 12 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of RAM total, then you can probably push 4. So you can do 496 megs of RAM or, drawing a blank here, to 2048. This gives you 2 gigs of RAM. Processors, again, if you have a quad-core processor, select 2. If you have a 6 or an 8-core processor, you can bring the core count a little bit higher, and that'll give you better performance. So this is where it's important to understand, and this is kind of what the topic of today is networking. NAT basically secures your this network. So this Windows machine that I'm creating, or this virtual machine I'm creating in Windows, will not have the same IP address or same network as the machine that's hosting it. So what that means is this machine that I'm about to create can't talk directly to the machine that's hosting it. If that doesn't make sense, just ask questions in the chat and I can explain it more. But the reason why you may want to do that is if you don't want, for security's sake, if you're opening something that could have a virus because you want to see what it does, if you want to mess around and see what kind of things break, it's not going to expose your home network to this virtual machine we created. NAT hides everything behind the host. So if I wanted to expose this virtual machine to the network, I can hit bridged. And bridged means if my laptop has an IP address of 192.168.1.5, and I select bridged here, that means this virtual machine will have 1.6, for example, and they can talk to each other, I can share files, etc. So I have two virtual machines created right now, both Linux and Windows, on bridged, so I can talk to each other very quickly and easily. So in this case, we'll leave it at bridged. Everything else can pretty much stay the same. You don't have to mess with that. It's more important with a virtual machine like Kali that you have at least 2 gigs of RAM. I suggest at least a 2-core processor if you're actually going to be using it for things like looking at code or whatnot. And then, of course, your storage space if you want to install things. So we got that virtual machine set up. I'm going to hit close and finish. And there we go. So this is now ready to run. When I hit play virtual machine, and this is all on a Ryzen 8-core desktop. So I'm streaming on the same machine that's running this Windows virtual machine, which is also running a Kali virtual machine inside it. So the new processors are pretty ridiculous. But from here, if you want to actually install Kali, you'll have to do graphical install, and then it walks you through it. Create a username. Where do you want to install it? Do you want it to reach out to the web, etc.? It'll ask you a few basic questions. Set a time zone. What keyboard you have, US, for example. So that's that. So we have already done that. And to save time, I'm going to turn this off. Let's power off. Yep. Because if I go up here, I have Kali Linux already running. Now, Kali Linux has a ton of tools. You can add tools to any Linux or Windows environment you want. The reason why a lot of people use Kali is because it comes with a lot pre-installed, which is awesome. So right now, I think what we're going to do, now that we have the operating system stand up, we're going to get them to talk to each other. And to do that, this is a port scan I did on the Windows box. So we're going to show you on the Windows side first, because I think that's where most people will start. So this program is free. It is legal. You can use it on your home network, which I recommend doing if you're ever curious about what kind of ports are being opened. And we'll talk about that more in depth on a whiteboard in a minute. But so I want to see what's on the Kali box. How can I talk to the Kali box? So I'm going to get the IP address of that machine. Okay, so the IP address of this virtual machine is right here. And if I go to, so that's 50.66. So I'm going to go back to my Windows box and type in that address. So that's the IP address, the target, if you will, of the Kali machine. And intent scan is basically a full barrage of tests that ZenMap will do in this case, which is a port scanner. So I'm going to hit scan. It's going to locate that Kali box on my network, and it scans for open ports on the Kali machine. Now, depending on what I have enabled, if I have open ports, it'll show up here. I manually enabled, while that's waiting, if I do UFW status, which is the firewall, oops, I think it's all. Let's see. Show verbose. Okay, I think this might be the best way. Okay, so right now I have port 22 opened, and we're going to test that with the port scanner that we have on Windows. And check this out. So this is the results from scanning the Linux box, and you can see quite a bit because we did the intent scan. It scanned 1,000 ports. Let's see if it found anything open. It's found one port. We're going to go down a little bit. There's the Kali box right there. And to save time, thousands. Here, let me show you something else. Do a quick scan because I want to focus on something that's more important instead of trying to have a bunch of garbled text that will take a long time to explain. But this will be quick. And while we're waiting on that, Okay, so it confirmed that the host is online because I provided the IP address. It was able to find it. And then in just a couple seconds, we should see a port, unless I locked it down, which it looks like I did. So that's why we didn't find anything. So let's go back here, and we're going to add, yep, here we go. I'm going to open a port. Now let's talk about what ports are, and this is the best way I can explain it. We're going to go to a whiteboard. I'll kind of draw it out what a port is, and this will make more sense in a moment. Okay, so think of a port as a door in your computer or a network. So if your router opens a port and it's port 80, that's the web port. Basically anything that's trying to communicate on port 80, your router's going to say, yes, come on in. So pretend this wall represents either your computer or your router. And ports are basically little doors to get in. So with the Kali box we're setting up, this is the one we're talking about, port 22. Right now, all of these are closed and nothing will get in. That's why when I did the port scan, it came back as 0. So if I open the port, this is going to be fun to draw in 3D. So now port 22 is open, and my Windows 7 machine, when it starts scanning all these ports, it's going to say, hey, this one got through. And here's Kali. So that's what doing that firewall rule I just made did. It said, okay, if anything wants to come in on port 22, let it pass through. Now, it can pass through, but Kali also has to be listening to port 22 to provide an answer. And in this case, we're doing something called SSH. It's like a secure tunnel. You can put any different service you want on different ports depending on what you're installing. I have SSH turned on because we obviously want this to work for the demo, right? So now that we did the port scan and it came back negative, and I just opened it, let's go back to the port scan and we'll try it again. Okay. So we did a new port scan. Oh, this is the Kali box. Let's go back to Windows now that we added that rule. And let's see if it shows up. And look at that. Now when we do the verbose, these are the rules that I created, which is allow 22. Let's go back to Windows. We're going to do another port scan. And this is a quick scan because it'll just quickly demonstrate what's coming in. That won't take too long. There we go. So check this out. It's in green, which means we can get in. So port 22, TCP open, SSH. Now here's what's funny about Windows. I scanned the Windows box and I got a bunch of them without enabling anything. These are just open ports with Windows, whether it's from software or not. This is everything that's open inside the network. Now I showed you that little squiggly line earlier. If we look back at the whiteboard, that line in the middle can be a router. So if I open ports there, it would be the outside world versus everything on the inside. So going back to this, let's go look at the results. So that means if I go to Windows and I want to talk to Linux, check this out. So I'm going to hit load, and this is the same IP address. If you see the 50.66, and then up here in the Zen map, the 50.66, I'm going to connect. This is a key, a public key, basically, because I haven't connected to that box. It's saying, hey, do you trust connecting to this machine? I'm going to say yes. And look at that. This is the Kali box. That black screen is actually Linux right now. So now you see how it says root Kali? And I'm on the Windows machine. If I go back to Kali, see how it says root Kali? So watch this. So if I go back here, notice there's nothing on the desktop. Let's try to do something to that box. See desktop. Look at that. Now it says test. So I just created a folder on the target machine called test. Let's try looking at it. And look at that. There's the test box. So by opening a port and exposing that, or opening a door, I was then able to log into the machine. In this case, there was obviously a password. I'm not going to show how to brute force or do any really hardcore hacking that would get me in trouble. But I logged into that box. We created a folder, and that would let me put content in that folder. So if I wanted a quick way to do it, there's another really cool tool. And again, if anyone has questions that's watching the stream and you want something covered more, just let me know. Let's do the IP address of this box, 50.66. Yes. Look at that. Desktop, and there's test. So I'm now on the Windows computer logged into the Kali box, and I can copy, let's see what I got here. Go to downloads. I want something a little smaller. Okay, so here's a 2 megabyte file. I'm gonna drag and drop, and there it is. Let's go back to Kali Linux. Test, and check it out. So, I mean, this is an executable. It won't work on Kali, but as an attacker, if they got into your box because you had an open port and they scanned it, they can literally put files in your computer. So port scanning is a pretty powerful tool. Most routers, by default, will have all your ports closed. But as a gamer, if you enable port forwarding, let's say you connect to Xbox and it says NAT strict, and you start opening all these ports, that's letting whatever traffic you want flow out. So if someone finds one way in, then they can use those ports to remotely access machines on your network, do what's called fingerprinting, find out what kind of devices you have, etc. So this is kind of a basic example of port security, I guess, and how you can set that up. Now, Kali Linux, I talked about how it has a lot of tools. Let's expand this better. Okay, so I did it this way because the webcam will block it, but there's a lot of different categories of tools in Kali Linux. So if you look at information, these are tools to gather info, whether it be about stuff on your home network, stuff on the web, visualizing things like Maltego can actually take a lot of information and kind of map things out. Kali is an incredibly powerful tool. That whole ZenMap thing I showed you, let's go back. ZenMap comes with Kali Linux. I didn't have to install it. So all the other stuff that you normally have to put on a Windows box to get it to work, it's just there with Kali, and sky's the limit, so you can get creative with it. So let's think of what else we can do here. I think that covers the port security pretty well. The stream is going pretty quick, which is good, but ask questions if something is confusing. We're going to go back to Windows and find out why a couple of these ports are open. So if I go to the Windows Firewall, these are, so here's one. If I look at the ports, that's not good. So we actually found this in Kali Linux. So tight VNC is a way to view the desktop remotely. And if I had that port open on the web, Kali found it. Let's go back to that and see what it's on. Right now, tight VNC is running on port 5900. So if I used VNC on Linux, I could actually see the desktop, the Windows desktop, because I found that open port. Windows 7, not the most secure thing. I did install some stuff, but that shows you how just adding one program can kind of open the door for people to get in. Now, I want to talk about a couple more things with a port scanner, because if you do, so there's, I think I gotta explain this. There's different layers of networking technology. There's actually 7, and let's draw it on the, well, yeah, let's put it on the board. You know what? I have a better idea, because I think this will visualize it a lot better than what I can demonstrate. It's gonna be, give me a second here. Okay, so I snipped it. We're gonna show you here. So this is an OSI model. Basically, this is how networking topology works. and the bottom being physical. That's basically your the cable, if you will. You know, when the cable's plugged into your networking adapter or your Wi-Fi adapter is connected to your router, this is the physical is like the raw packets of data, the bits, the zeros and ones, if you will. Data link. So if you ever looked into networking technology, data link is your MAC address. It's basically like a 12-digit number that's unique to your networking card on your computer. It's kind of like what your mailing address is on your house. That never changes. Network is your IP address. So you can go from your hardwired port on your laptop to wireless on your laptop. And even though it's the same laptop, your IP address will actually change because it has a different MAC address. So as you get up the stack of OSI, you have different layers of technology. And I don't think we're going to get into looking at packets of data today because this is a lot of stuff to cover. But transport through application is how a session is established. You know, when you log into, Mixer.com or YouTube or wherever you're going and you provide credentials, that establishes a session with that. So that's where these layers of networking fundamentals come in. And that's how it kind of figures out how to talk back to your machine and how to keep you authenticated because you set up your own key. Application is, your software. Again, this is basically at the web browser and operating system level, not so much like the raw internet card or anything like that. So with that being said, we don't care about this now. If I were to scan my entire network, so instead of a 50.66, I can do a 50.0. And every home network by default, when you buy a router at the store, you get a free router modem from your internet service provider. It always has a /24 network. And what that means is you basically have 254 IP addresses you can have on your network before you run out of space. So the last number here can be up to 254 if you're looking for specific IPs. But if I leave it at 0 and do a /24, I'm not going to do that now because I don't want to expose my entire network to you guys. But if I run that, instead of just this giant page of information about that one Kali box, it's going to show me this giant page of information for every single computer on my network. Every, smart thermostat, phones, televisions, whatever's connected to the network, I could see everything about it here. And then I can dig down and find out what ports are open. So this is a really powerful tool for understanding how your network is set up and what's exposed and what isn't. So I strongly recommend getting familiar with this stuff. Again, if I see comments between here, YouTube, Twitch, etc., I'll be happy to answer them. But that's basically what ports are. The long story short of this is think of a port as a door, and an open port means an open door, and anyone can get in if they're looking for it. So it's super important to lock it down. Now, if you want to lock it down, Linux is one thing. Windows is a lot easier because you can just go to the firewall. And if I didn't want tight VNC to be running, I'm going to disable it. Now it's off. So if I run back to here, I'm assuming that if I ran that attack or that port scan again, I won't see it anymore. Unless there's another rule I didn't see or look for yet, but we'll scan that real quick. So we'll hit that one up. That is going to get close to wrapping up the stream here today. Again, the first part, I just wanted to talk about Kali Linux ports, etc., to explain that. And I think what we'll do is look at packets of data. Basically, when you talk to a website, for example, if you log into something like Mixer.com or YouTube, you can see that packet of data hitting the web and where your IP address is going, etc. So when they talk about DDoSing or doxing somebody, that's because they got your IP address and they targeted you. So the next stream we're going to talk about is going to focus on how do you protect your IP from being exposed? What are good practices to keep yourself from getting figured out where you are, who you are, etc., and how that technology works so you can protect yourself. And a lot of that will do with a VPN, but it also has to do with just good awareness on what you should click on and what you should avoid and what should come across as suspicious. So let's look and, yep. So we ran that test, and when I disabled that VNC rule, now it's locked down. I can't actually see it. Oh, you know what? I targeted the wrong box. That makes more sense. It's like we're missing a few. That one is 156. So we'll fix that. My bad. This should be pretty quick because it's one machine. If you scan your entire network and you do an intense scan, it's going to take quite a while because it's going to run through this entire series of steps every single time. So if you look, this it did not find VNC open anymore. So that one rule, because I did a scan, I found something was wide open. I now blocked the ability to remotely see the desktop on the other screen if I somehow got credentials to it using the VNC tool. So all because of a port scan. Now, you can scan your home network, like I said. If you're outside of your network, you can scan your router IP, and that'll tell you if your router is letting through anything on the outside web. Now, most people aren't going to have a remote machine set up. So with that being said, a quick way to do it is to use your cell phone. If you have an Android phone, it's much easier. But basically look for a port scanning app on your cell phone. Do not be on your Wi-Fi because you don't want to be inside your network. You want to be outside. So just use your cellular data. And then when you look at, I can't do this now because I don't want to give away my IP. But if you go to whatsmyip.org, let's type that real quick, just in case you can't hear me well. So if you go to whatsmyip.org, see if I can quickly blow this up here. I don't usually zoom in on this. Well, either way. Whatsmyip.org will give you your router's IP address. And when you do that, you can then use your phone's port scanner and type that IP address in, and now it'll scan your entire network to see what doors are open. That's honestly the most important port scanner to use, because if your internal stuff is vulnerable, then you're only at risk for people that are inside your network. But if the outside of your network is vulnerable, that means people can see you. There is a website I can show you. The website itself isn't illegal. If you do certain things with it, it can be, obviously if you do something illegal, you're doing something illegal, but this is just a tool to give you information. So if you know your IP address, you can type it in here and it'll actually tell you if it's vulnerable. You can scan it. Now, this is a large collection of vulnerable machines or traffic cams, webcams, and again, none of this is illegal. They would have shut it down. A lot of this serves as the ability to help you or help the people that operate these services or technologies lock their system down. It's a good resource for that. But I have to log in. I don't want to give that information away yet. Let's see if I can do something without logging in. Okay. So some of the stuff is locked out with password. And again, I'm not trying to expose everything right now. But if you look here, this gives you an IP address of someone in France. They have what server they're running, what they're accepting, etc. So this is, if you want to, again, I have to kind of skirt the line here. If you wanted to leverage an exploit based off stuff that's vulnerable, sites like this can target your home network. And if you have a router, you've seen, or if you've ever seen a news article where a router was vulnerability, all the Netgear routers left this open, or there's some back door. Anyone that has that Netgear router, if you will, shows up here. And that's why I'm showing it to you. It's not to go looking for something to attack, but this is how you want to protect yourself from being owned, because privacy is huge. So again, this is Shodan.io. Good resource, but you can do your own port scan if you don't want to go to a website and kind of put a flag on yourself. That about covers the stream today. I'm going to be answering questions, I guess, post-stream. This is obviously a slow one, which is fine. It's our first stream, so I didn't expect too much yet. But I hope, with that being said, you learned something today. If you have any questions that come up after, shoot me a DM It's the same handle. It's GI Joe My Goodness on Discord. Obviously, if you're watching this on the streaming platform, you can leave a message there. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to sign off for now, and we'll see you next time when we dive more into the packets and how to protect yourself from denial of service attacks and getting doxxed.
Yeah.